Anything because the recording started.
They kind of like the MCS or infinite loop sort of thing where you can see on the screen.
Oh.
The meeting and then the meeting.
Yeah.
I do that in class sometimes, like right before class starts, I'll put like what's on the projector, I'll make it the camera mode, and so the students can see the back of their own heads.
Our bathroom, we had mirror above the sink, and then we had a mirror. A friend of ours came in, and looked in the mirror, and he saw this reflection. And he said, "Ooh, that's messing with infinity." But it's true. They're just that almost perfectly horizontal, but they're offset enough that you can actually see. Doesn't reflect.
Have you provided these to the people that are on Zoom?
Good to know.
Okay.
I know the everyone.
Hello. Hi.
I did. I remember you saw all the down that you're here. I didn't just get too many members from the public. Every time I put one out, it's you here. So yes, I'll get all your names in the minutes. That's where it matters. And
So I converted that PDF to Excel.
Oh,
I finished 11 minutes ago.
oh, yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
The PDF for the pre-count.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. 'Cause I read it.
But
Yeah,
I have effort to do that.
those are the permits that Hannah has processed in January.
You're amazing.
She could make a more like, I don't know, formatted like the previous artists had it. We're still working on that, but
Well, this is nice in that it has map.
yeah,
The other one just was just an Excel spreadsheet with
yeah.
the address and information about what the page does. This doesn't have as much information about each individual.
You're looking real big.
Yeah,
Permit application.
I brought it with me too.
but she's still getting the hang of everything. She'll have a more robust list.
Yeah.
Where are we on before? So I see there's two other people on Zoom where they vote.
Do I need to let him? Thanks for.
Oh, are they here? I think lots of other attendees. Are you?
Sorry, I forgot to let y'all in and you will talk. So we have Julia. We just need one more person.
Password.
Yes.
What's
or
a Wi-Fi
anything.
password for here, you know? The system and
I don't.
We don't know.
people have tried to get out, I've tried to get out before.
Oh, okay.
I can email
You do some Rubik too, but that's not super helpful because I don't know the password.
It'd be nice
Okay.
when next meeting, you look at
Yes.
how we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause today, I simply,
Also, it occurs that we don't want to say the password out loud when we're recording.
I preloaded all the documents that I thought I might,
Oh, yes, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I just.
yeah. Well, I stumbled over that. But even then, sometimes it's nice to be able to look something up.
Yeah.
Without resources and put out my iPhone, we can sell it.
I guess that's true. I'll look it up.
Like there's another, can you control that from your laptop or your?
No, I have to go up there to do it. Okay. now we have a-
Nancy? I think I've seen you on, I'm John. I've never physically. I've never seen you.
If you see what you get in person, that.
Yes, it's nice. You can do it. See, Tracy. See, Tracy.
Sorry. I'm just pretty. I don't do it right now. You're there. We just went through that, right?
Could you spell your name for me?
BICK,
And then last one,
SCU.
alright. And we can wait on Sandy or we can start since we have. Can you guys hear us?
Yes, I can now. Yeah.
Well, I think we could get underway. And hopefully Sandy will stop. So I'll call the meeting to order. I didn't prepare a short reflection. Anybody else want to offer anything? Reflection on trees? We can move on to introductions. So we usually do introductions, and we do have at least one member of the public here. And so I'll start. I'm Dick Olmsted. I'm current chair of the tree board.
John Brew from the Stewardship Foundation.
Scary from the Stewardship Foundation.
Larry Goldman, I'm a council liaison.
And Riley Bushnell, I am the assistant planner and I'm taking vacancy.
For those of you who are online, want to introduce yourselves, please? Hannah, start with you. You're muted. Can't hear you.
I wonder if she's having trouble with the mic.
Maybe. Well, Hannah Swanson is our city arborist. Thank you, Hannah. We can figure it out. We can talk to you later, but Julia?
Julia Bent, retiring tree board member.
Marty Byrne, tree board member.
Okay, thank you. We sent around, Riley sent around an agenda earlier that is a pretty basic agenda. I have a few items that I'll just note at this point that we will have for discussion. Under communication, well, we'll come to that since it's just announcing the next tree board meeting. Under old business, we'll have a report from Julia on Macular Creek project. I'd like if Sandy is here to have her give us an outreach report. I will go bring up the work plan again, which I'd like to have for final approval so that we can get that to the council. And that's what I have for, let's see. Oh, and just a word about under tree replacement, something about this document that was sent around with regard to the tree removal by the stride and transit plan. Under new business, I have a draft of the annual report that Riley has passed around that I would also like to have open for comment and edits, additions, and adoption if we can, so that we can also get that to the council. And then there will be a few things under reports and announcements. So with that understanding, we have motion to approve the agenda. Andy, thank you. Second. Marty or Julia?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Marty. All in favor, raise your hand. We can see.
Aye.
Thank you, Marty. Okay, good. There is a digital hand you can use, Julia. Okay. We've adopted the agenda. Riley sent around the minutes. I have already, he sent them to me previously to review. Have you had a chance to take a look at the minutes? If so, do we have a motion to accept the minutes? Andy, thank you. Second.
I second.
Thank you, Julia. All in favor, raise your hand.
Virtually.
Okay, thank you. Minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is citizen comments, and so this portion is set aside for public. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, I've been paying attention to the sound transit, bus rapid transit developments, specifically trees. And recently, just a couple of days ago, we received a tree inventory for the 60% design This inventory was actually done in August 2022, but the first time it became available to us was 2 days ago. We sent a copy to the tree board, the PDF document. I had since parsed that into Excel and made it into a much more, I believe, much more usable form for people. And we will get it sent out to you guys. We'll send it to Riley tomorrow. Some highlights from that. There's more than 700 trees that were inventoried. I believe it was quite a thorough, rigorous inventory for the most part. There are many significant and landmark trees scheduled to be removed. One area of concern that I have is the temporary construction easement that's going to be put in is basically a clear cut, from what I can gather from the document. And so I wonder why that has to be, and if there's plans to replace what's in there. Also, for replacement in the right of way, a couple of meetings ago, it was discussed trees in the public right of way. What is the interpretation of the tree code for replacement in the right of way? We would ask some help in understanding what that is. That's basically all I have. I have more data to share. I will send it to Riley, get it disseminated to people. I believe I've done an accurate job. Thank you.
Thanks, John. You mentioned the clear cut construction.
Yeah, there's.
So is that an area that's like a staging area that's not actually part of the
I have a picture.
right of way? Can we? Do you know what that area?
Yeah, it's basically, if you were, I could describe like, if you have an owner's property, you have a temporary construction easement, you know, a permanent easement where Sound Transit's acquiring that property, or excuse me, permanent, they're purchasing the property, a wall and sidewalk roadway. That's kind of like the layers.
So the temporary easement will be something that the construction people can use while they're going through the construction, but then it will revert to.
I'm not clear on,
It's revert.
it reverts.
Later in the process of construction. So if you have a tree, like they have a 165th stand of trees behind someone's house, it's in the temporary easement. All of those evergreens that are 50, 30 feet tall are going because they're in the temporary easement.
And those are included in the inventory.
They're,
There's, and then there will be some mitigation in terms of providing replacement trees.
so that's a really black one. That's kind of going to be tough for Lauren because there's no place to really put these trees back in the same place in the same way. And then never replace the canopy.
It's not at all clear to us what the replacement plan is. In fact, that's a question that we have, and we would bring forward to the tree board to please think about that as well. I don't find anywhere where it talks much about replace.
So Riley, I think it would be great if we could get somebody either from the city or from the rapid transit program to come and meet with the tree board at some point. It seems like this is going to come to a head. I think that we need more information than we have. I mean, it's great.
If it helps, I have some I was gonna make them at the end of the meeting, but I have some comments that might be germane to this. I can wait until the end of the meeting.
Let's wait or take it up under old business if we want at that point. Thank you, John. Vicky,
Can I
So I'm gonna continue on for a
Okay.
beat, and then I know people can't see, but this is what's going in your clear cut is a big wall, because what's happening is apparently 8 years ago, the mayors got together at the city, Bothell, Kenmore, Lake Forest Park, decided they needed a BRT lane. That's fine, transportations work that way, right? Transportation systems, but nobody drew this up to see what the impacts were. And it was really only in 2019 and 20 when they first started to see these impacts, because first the alignment impacted homes on the east side. And it took out, I learned this at a Sound Transit meeting, a board meeting, that it took out 9 homes. So instead of narrowing the footprint, in their good judgment, they decided to move the whole road to the west, which then takes out, if you go from 38 up to the, like to the back, almost 41st across the street, takes out a swath of about 16 feet from the property line all the way up. That's clear cut. So these 700 trees you're hearing about, some are on the east, but the majority on the west. And it's a clear cut right up all the way through. And I find this so ironic because Tacoma is currently trying to replant 500 trees rather than remove 500 trees as we're doing here. And when this was first mentioned, it was first mentioned in early 2020, but it was never mentioned in terms of tree removal. So I'm a property owner and I got a little very generic diagram showing that the road was starting to move west, but no one ever talked to the group or what this actually meant to the city. I think it's it's a great oversight that this was never flagged as a concern, and that there's another way of figuring out how to do the BRT lane or narrow the lanes or eliminate the planting strip or some way to make this fit the profile of the road without taking out 500 trees. And it was 439 at 30%, and now it's 560% and counting. And 385 of those trees are actually in the temporary easement zone. So, I mean, it's really a waste of resources. It's backwards thinking, I think, in terms of climate change. They provide solar protection for the homes. They provide mental ease for people. I mean, it's been shown that where you take out trees and you clear cut and you have this concrete corridor that we're getting, that you have, I'll pull this figure later, that you create a lot of stress, that you create aggression, that you create violence, and there's 10% more shootings in neighborhoods that are basically deforested. And you'll invite repeat. And so you're going to start looking a lot more like Lake City Way, which is, I don't want to badmouth Lake City Way, but that's the future with this type of planning. In other words, you see big high rises going up over there in Lake City right now. That will move into Lake Forest Park because the transit corridor, that's how it works. So I just think some rethinking of our, we're going to have to, city will be totally redone for this in the future. And in the meantime, the 300 or 500 trees that are now coming out, they should be coming out. There should be a way to mitigate that. Thank you.
Yeah,
And I take 15 seconds.
sure.
I want to say it's important. I'm a fan of sound transit. There's my work part. I'm thankful for good transit. I want the bus rapid transit thing personally. Support it. I just want to have mitigation for trees and smart design. That's my goal, not to stop the transit project.
And I do know that. I'm also a transit supporter and I voted for it. And I've worked for sound transit as a consultant in the past. And normally they do a really good job, is what I would say. I just think this is a giant oversight on his staff.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Although I would say that Larry probably agree that zoning is a totally separate issue.
It is.
It's unlikely to ever look like Lake City Way because it's not going to be zoned commercial all the way along there. But I get your point that by taking out those trees, widening the wall, bring out the wall, it's going to really somewhat dramatically change the
Well, and the plan in the city is to, on transit corridors, is to take corner lots and turn them into multi-use type. And if you look down the road, that's the idea. Multi-use housing, larger, low income, retirement, whatever. And the other thing I want to add, one last thing, is that this lane only saves 2 minutes on the transit route between basically 105th and basically to the college. That's how much is being saved in time. So it's not really the time saving that they promised. It's more of a paper idea that people agree to.
time saved in for transit. By segregating transit from the other traffic lanes, so that there'd be time saved for all of the others, some small proportion.
Well, there's already a lane on the going basically west or south, and so you're only adding one going east. And they do have things called Q jumps, which they're using on 145th to do the same idea to help the buses move faster. So I mean, there are other ways of looking at this, but there's other ways of pinning down the lanes or not having a planting strip everywhere. There's ways of mitigating the tree removal and still having the BRT lane.
Thank you. I think it would be good to have, if we could have somebody, maybe, Larry, if that is feasible to have someone.
You need
report?
someone.
someone either from the city staff or from rapid transit.
I will defer my yeah, I think once I say my other stuff,
Okay.
that might help clarify some of this.
Good.
Maybe.
Thanks. Okay. Communications, next meeting will be March 1st. We're non-leap year this year, so it'll be also the 1st of March, 4 weeks from now, here and presumably on Zoom. Any other things by way of communications that we need to announce, Riley? I can't think of anything. Okay, then moving on to old business. Julia, can you give us an update on the McAleer Creek? Before you start, I was going to announce this later, but this will be Julia's last official meeting with the tree board. The end of her 3rd term. She was one of the original members, I believe. Is that right, Julia?
Yep.
And so I want to personally give her my thanks, and I think we all owe Julia a lot of thanks. The work she's done with the McAleer Creek project and other projects, especially things having to do with invasive plants in our urban forests, she's exhibited a tremendous amount of leadership as well as sweat equity in making those things happen. Julia.
Okay, just one minor thing, which is that on the east side of Lake City Way of Bothell Way at that point, across from the town center. So where the tattoo parlor is, all the way up to where the architect's office is. In that area, some cedar trees were, before I came on the board, some cedar trees were planted there, replacing a whole row of poplars that came down because they were endangering the electric lines along Bothell Way. And some had fallen and taken out the power lines. So they took them all down. And they put in these cedar trees that at the time were about 6 feet tall. And my first summer on the board, along with a couple of other board members, we carried water to those, to water the darn things, which involved buckets and wheelbarrows and getting water from both the tattoo parlor and from the architects. But I'm pleased to report that I walked there the other day and they've probably twice as high as they were before, with only a few exceptions. So they've done really, really well. So that's a nice thing, because as they grow, they will provide a good block between the Burt Gilman Trail and 522. So that's a success to which the tree board contributed. My main focus of work with the tree board was on the McAleer Creek project. It's about 1,000 linear feet along the creek, along Perkins Way. For those who haven't been there, if you drive down 182nd to where it intersects Perkins Way, you're kind of in the middle of the project. It's more upstream than downstream from there. And we've worked on that since 2020 and working with Applied Ecology, which has been a very good working partner, very responsible. They do good work. First, we cleared invasives. We did spray. There was no other way to do it. And then after that, we went in and planted, I don't have a total. I haven't written up a final report, but probably 35 cedars. We just planted, anyway, I'll get to that. Bunches of bare roots as well as herbs. And in the last few weeks, Applied Ecology has gone back in and done quite a bit of hand weeding. Oh, excuse me, after the summer of 2020, they went back in 2021 and did some more spraying. There's just no other way to deal with things growing. All the sprays, the herbicides used were aquatic approved. And then this last month, because I guess it was February, they went in. We had about $8,000 left in the grant. The grant was supposed to be up in December of 22, but King County Waterworks, who is the granting agency, was worried we wouldn't use all our money. So they gave us an extension and Applied Ecology went in. They planted this time they planted a lot of spruce trees. They had a terrible time with mountain beaver eating the cedar trees that we put in, especially the smaller ones. So a lot of those were decimated, but we put in spruce trees this time, thinking they'd be less tasty with their nice sharp needles. And we've also put cages around a lot of these. We've double caged some this time with chicken wire around the base of the big wire cages. One of the workers said, well, probably because they're rodents, they're just going through the holes in the wire, which were 2 by 4 inches, I think. So anyway, it's pretty much completed. We have $256.86 left in the grant. I think we'll let that revolve back to King County Waterworks. So I will at some point do a final report on it, both to the tree board and to King County Waterworks, and we'll be done. The only thing I would request of this tree board at this point, well, 2 things. One, go take a look, because a heck of a lot of work went into that, especially John Brew and your chairman, Dick Olmsted, and I, and Marty Byrne. We carried a lot of plants and placed them where they should be planted. That saved quite a bit of money for the crew to work with. But so I hope you'll go look at it. And the other thing is, I would hope that the tree board will keep in mind that these restoration areas do not work unless you continue to do some maintenance. So I would hope that in a couple of years, maybe, that the tree board would allocate some funds for a professional crew again. Let's not mess with volunteers. For a professional crew to go in and not spray, but hand weed the whole thing. There's a lot of ivy that creeps down from the hillside. And in theory, Mike Lasecki of King Conservation District is working with those landowners, all of whom, by the way, have been very willing landowners for this project. He's working with them to remove the seas of ivy that cloak the slopes above where we have worked. We have worked only along the flat riparian area. So I would hope that in the future the tree board would consider it. If I think of it, I'll remind the tree board as a citizen that would be a good way to spend a bit of money, so that we do maintain what has happened before. Otherwise, it'll just all get buried again. And hopefully Mike Lasecki will follow through. And if he does, then there won't be a lot of need for maintenance. So anyway, that's my summary. And then, as Dick mentioned, this is my last meeting, and I am retiring from the tree board. And I think it's maybe, when did the tree board start? Does anyone know? I can't remember. Anyway, it's been a long time. So that's my report.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Julia?
Just a big thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you for your help.
Likewise, I go past there often, and it's super improvement from what it was.
Yeah,
Almost,
it's looking good. I mean, you really go down there in the spring when things are starting to leaf out. There's all kinds of ground cover that were native ground covers that was smothered by the ivy that have just sprung up, and they flower and they're quite gorgeous. There are a lot of weeds down there still. You go through cycles of weeds, but then they die back and you still are left with what's there. An ongoing problem is going to be the knotweed, because it's going to continue to come down into the area from areas upstream where there's a lot of knotweed. I think if someone were to remember to go down there and just hand pull the really young knotweeds, we could stay ahead of it. But that's about it. Yeah, it does look good.
thanks again. The next item under old business was to have an outreach report from Sandy, but looks like she's not going to make it after all.
And Dick,
Yeah.
sorry if I might interrupt.
Sure.
Since I'm no longer on the tree board, I am going to sign off. I'm not feeling well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Julia.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you, Julia.
Oh, wait, Julia, Wait,
If she signs off, we
Wait.
can score.
wait,
I
wait,
haven't. I'm there.
okay. We need you to stay with your logged in to maintain a quorum.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay attention or participate, but please don't log out, okay?
Okay, I'll plug my iPad in. Hope it doesn't die on me.
I did, there was one thing I wanted to add to whatever Sandy was gonna do, is that I was poking around. Searching on Google for Lake Forest Park information about tree removal and tree, that sort of thing. I found a really great document that, whoops, I think I sent two of you. You want to send one back, I'll give this one. Right.
I'm gonna have to type it.
Oh, are there two? Well, maybe they're,
You can-
okay. Oh, just one, okay, I'm sorry. This is a document called Tree Protection Removal Information, the Lake Forest Park Customer Information Bulletin. Which is just the sort of thing we have been talking about wanting to prepare. This is prepared by and is available on the Champion Tree Care website. And it's, if I may say so, a better, more concise and succinct summary of what somebody needs to do, what the restrictions are for tree permit, tree removal permits that I've seen anywhere else. I mean, all of this information is drawn from our website accessible information. It's just they put it together in a really great 3-page document. They cite Steve Bennett for more information. Steve may have had some part in putting this together. I don't know anything else about it, but this was, I thought, really good. I wanted to pass it on to Sandy or Mandy or Marty, whoever might be in the future working on.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you would ask Riley, would you please put either a link to that or?
Yeah, I will send the link
send it
to
to
Riley, and he can share it with everybody.
Because I didn't catch all of the title or where you got it from.
So
Champion Tree Care, it's a commercial.
she
Okay.
logged out.
Okay, champion, thank you.
Oh, she's probably in the, yeah.
Oh, yeah, she was gonna switch to her
And-
iPad or something.
No, actually, oh no, there she is.
Can we let in all these people?
Well, no, they're all in, can we make them panelists? Because right now they're here as a
Matthew Lamb is
Okay.
not, is the only one I don't think is in, right? I don't know.
We'll let Julius speak. And then. I don't know what we do with the other two. We'll just allow to talk first, yeah.
Randy Sabangas from the stewardship.
And Matthew Lamb's a member of the public.
Yeah, and I don't know what we do in terms of letting them talk. Because public comment already happened. Do we just say?
If it was our negligence that
Yeah.
they didn't get a chance, we should probably give them the opportunity.
Yeah, okay.
You could have, what the planning commission does is they have a second public comment period at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
I think that would be reasonable. Okay.
Yeah.
The Champion Tree Care has a page in which they have links to all of the cities in our region, North King County, South Snohomish County, and what the tree restrictions or permitting processes are for, Everett and Lake Forest Park and Seattle, and
Actually,
I don't have I didn't print a copy of that, but this is the one document that I did print. So that I found that to be really helpful. I mean, I've actually contracted with them to do tree work on my property years ago. So I was favorably impressed with them as a service, and even more so when I see this. Okay, well, without Sandy here, we'll pass on next month on having a report on the outreach. I had down the tree replacement issue with respect to the transit, which we've already had a discussion prompted by the citizen comment. Larry, would this be a good time for you to give us more information?
Sure. So on the council side, there are two issues that we've been hearing from the public regarding sound transit, more than others. And I think those two core areas are, what do we do with tree removal and what do we do with retaining walls? At our most recent council meeting, so that was last Thursday, 6 days ago. We
Real quick, sorry, where would this be under in the agenda?
We're still on old business.
Old business, okay.
Last Thursday, we introduced an ordinance regarding retaining walls and design standards. And we'll be discussing it further at our committee of the whole on Monday, February 6th. But one of the things that might be relevant to the tree board is that retaining walls would be required to either have vegetation on them or some sort of artistic design. Normally, the usual order would be have the tree board look at it and make recommendations, have the planning commission do likewise. We feel this is time sensitive, and so we're kind of the council saying, here's the draft. I think we still want to get feedback from the tree board, but in the interest of moving this forward expeditiously, have the tree board provide comments as we go, rather than have it designated, like you make official recommendations and then we start. I believe we're looking to do something similar with tree replacements, to try to clarify some of the issues that have been raised, for instance, right of way issues, things like that. That ordinance hasn't been introduced yet, but I imagine that will also be time sensitive or considered that we want to move on this as quickly as possible. So I would imagine once it's introduced, we will pass it along to the tree board and the planning commission to get feedback as we go. With both of these, there's secret rules that say that you have to get preliminary approval from the state. You have to have a formal public hearing. So we can't just vote on it like that day or the next week. So it does take some amount of time, but we want to get that process started as quickly as possible. And then while we're waiting for the state to give us kind of preliminary approval, use that time to get feedback from the public and feedback from the tree board and planning commission.
Is this just for the retaining walls? Sorry.
It's for definitely for the retaining walls. My understanding is we will be doing something similar for trees, but that ordinance has not yet been introduced. So to answer questions, I don't think there will be time to invite someone to a tree board meeting if we're looking to kind of move on this on the order of 1 or 2 months. So I think it might be, the ordinance will be public record once it's introduced at council. And then at the next tree board meeting, I think that would be a germane topic for the tree board to discuss. And then provide some feedback and vote on that at a tree board meeting, send that to council, and then we'll incorporate that. So I think that is the council's plan. I know it's in the interest of moving this expeditiously that we're not going through the very long deliberative process. So it's not meant to be stepping on your toes, and we should realize that this is an evolving situation.
Right, and I don't think we feel our toes are stepped on since you guys get paid the big bucks to make the hard decisions on us.
Yeah, but you're a volunteer. I mean, I would say my salary is the big bucks.
A question about the retaining walls. Are the retaining walls simply because the street is going to be cut back into that bank further and there needs to be something literally to retain the soil?
Essentially, yeah. I mean,
Or are they going to be one of those extended height things to be a noise?
it might be both. I believe that the ordinance is written in terms of retaining walls that are over I'm not sure exactly. I think so. If it's over 4 feet tall, this would apply. So I imagine it would also apply to sound walls. That's something that could bring up. I could bring up at the council, at the committee of the whole on Monday. But yeah, that's also in response to community feedback that we don't really want just very boring, gray, concrete, homogeneous walls. That we want there to be some sort of either actual or artistry to generate.
Some of the ones out by Kenmore and Waffle look nice, and some that are designed to look sort of like an actual rock face, and others that have, and others that have vines growing up.
Here's pictures of all that stuff. Here's some drawings, like that's what was originally in the 30%, the self-and 30%. This is like putting the actual visual impact document they had, said that doing this was very much a negative impact, and they advised that type of thing. If they had the two walls, they had to plant them somehow, either up or down, and actually Kenmore plants from top to bottom, and here's Rockville, this is Kenmore, this is Kenmore, and Kenmore has very little footprint, but they plant top and bottom.
So Riley, can I make a request of you? If you go into the packet from last Thursday's council meeting, the publicly available packet, it'll include the draft of the ordinance for the retaining walls. That might involve, so maybe wait until after the next town meeting on Monday, but if you could get the ordinance sent out to the tree board members, they could look it over in advance of the March 1st meeting. That way they would be able to provide comments on March 1st.
To that point, is this out of the scope of the tree board, considering it's not tree related or?
The retaining wall, I mean, to the extent
Yeah,
involves
separate,
greenery, I mean, that might be at the very least, so if it's out of scope, then don't worry about, I mean, unless the tree board really wants. it.
I mean, I'm kind of the way, I'm just trying to make sure we're, I don't know. Just thought thinking about
But
it.
at the very least, once we get, and I'm not sure what the exact timing is, but once we get the tree replacement ordinance, I think that definitely would be, great.
Oh. Yeah, you can shoot me an email maybe to remind me, but I have it written down.
Yep. I have a couple of other topics, but I would say, I think those are separate, so I'll save those.
Okay.
Thank you.
The last item on old business I had was adoption of the work plan, which we've gone over the last few meetings, and I've made all the changes that we discussed at the last meeting. And so that is the document that I sent out to everybody. And I'm realizing right now that we need Julia to be able to vote on this.
I don't, well, you have a quorum of 4.
Okay,
My understanding is you don't need an absolute majority of 7.
it just need a majority of the quorum.
Right, so as long as 3 out of the 4 of you that are present tonight
Okay.
vote yes, then the work plan would pass. That is my understanding.
So, if you wanted, Marty, Mandy, take a, Julia, if you're listening, take a look at this plan. I literally made the changes that we suggested last time. Deleted a few items that we agreed were no longer relevant. Merged a couple, did away with one of the headings so that 2 of them were combined into one. And got it down to 2 pages, which seems to make sense, given that we are never going to get through 3 pages worth of work and calendar. So do I have a motion to adopt this? We need to.
I have a question first. please.
Okay, Marty,
Is this written in stone? If we decide that sometime during the year that we want to drop something, is that okay? Or if we want to add something, is that okay?
my understanding is this is always a working document.
Okay, then I'll
In the
make a
year, we
motion
have
to
to
adopt.
present it to the council. But, so I'm sorry, I talked over you. What did you say, Marty?
I said I'll make a motion to adopt the work plan.
Okay, thank you. We have a second?
Yeah.
Okay, any second. All in favor, raise their hand. All right, thank you, Marty. The motion is adopted. Thank you. Okay, now, moving on to new business. I had just one item, under new business that I wanted to bring up, and that was the 2022 annual report. This is something we also have to present to the council and the mayor at the same time as the work plan. I think this, I don't know if it's required that they're at the same time, but both are supposed to be presented about this time here. And so I with help from Julia and Sandy, Steve Bennett, not sure who else gave me text for some of these sections. I've tried to summarize the work, accomplishments, and activities of the tree board for the last year. So I'll just walk through it briefly. The introduction simply identifies what the tree board's responsibilities are and list of tree board members during 2022, which includes a couple of members who left the tree board during the year. With Riley's help, we have expiration dates for all of the current terms for the tree board members. Julia is at the end of her third term and is leaving the tree board. I'm at the end of my, and Marty are also, whether you knew this or not, Marty, we are both at the end of our first terms. This came as a little surprise to me because I've been on the board for 4 years, but as I understand it, I must have started in the middle of a term because I did some reading into the bylaws of the commissions and tree board. And there are terms, each position in the board has a term. And it doesn't start when you were first appointed to the board. You're appointed to a position in the board. And if that position has another year to run on it before that expires, you serve out that term. And then the next term becomes your first term. So I think that's why I've been on 4 years and I'm just now at the end of my 3-year term. Which also explains why I started before Marty, I believe. Isn't that right, Marty? But you and I both have the same expiration date for our first term, because you probably started.
I think I came in the middle of a term too, so I'm not sure exactly when I started.
Okay, but Riley looked up all of these, this information. So Marty, you and I have to request reappointment if we so desire to be reappointed. And I think you should, if you want to just, I don't know, does that go through you, Riley?
Yeah, I can email both of you. You have to send a letter to the mayor. And then the mayor responds, and then I think that's what's needed.
Okay. Well, so look for a communication from Riley, Marty.
Yeah, I can email both.
Okay,
Planning staff and council liaison, we've had turnover on every position with respect to that during the last calendar year. And as also in the council liaison. So there's been a fair amount of turmoil. I don't necessarily mean that in a bad sense, but there's been a lot of coming and going
Turnover.
in the board and all of the staff associated with the board. But we have had some accomplishments. The city council adopted some of the recommendations we made to the code. The tree inventory is underway. We, especially with Sandy's leadership, but also with Marty and Mandy helping out with outreach and education side of things, is starting to take form and move in a more consistent way. Wrapping up of the Mackler Creek project that Julia reported on has been one of our big efforts. Substantial external funding is now essentially done. I think, as Julie reported, we continue to be active in the Lake Forest Park e-news, and I hope that in the coming year we'll, with Sandy's leadership on that, we'll continue to be active there, as well as developing other means of communication. And we updated one of the tree blocks to be illustrated in the last year. That's something that I've been working on with David Hepp, who had done the original Lake Forest Park tree block. And we have another one that we're going to get done this spring. So that's what I had come up with. Do any of you have anything else that I missed that we should include on this? Marty or Mandy?
I didn't see anything. It looked pretty complete to me. I read it this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. So Mandy, I'm sorry, the copy that I sent to Riley was the one that had all the markup on, so it makes it harder to read. Yeah, I just printed a clean one to print for myself today.
I did want to add that with the, we were discussing the durations of the terms of members, we have now 2 vacant positions. So if y'all know anyone that, fulfill the criteria of someone that can be on the board, they can apply.
Yeah.
So are you ready to consider a motion?
Yeah.
Do I have a motion to adopt the annual report? Andy, thank you. We have a second?
Second,
Marty, thank you. All in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, so the annual report is adopted. Larry, or Riley, how should we communicate this to the mayor and the council?
I'll have to follow up with that.
Okay,
I'll do that.
okay, so you have both of the documents.
Yes.
Make, turn
But you want to fully edit it, correct, as you said with the correction.
yeah, so, right, all I did was accept all the corrections and
Perfect.
for now,
Okay.
that is fine, and I
Mhm.
think that usually involves the chair of the tree board actually going to a council meeting. This is my first year as chair, so
Yeah, so either a council meeting or a work session, I think Riley can touch base with. Either Steve or
Yeah.
Tom French, or Bill Hill to already, figure out what council meeting has some time available for everybody to come. All right, so February meetings are Thursday the 9th and Thursday the 23rd.
my schedule is pretty flexible through March. I'm not gonna be teaching in the spring. Time will be tighter. Okay. Thank you. Any other new business that we should consider? I actually have something that, I don't know if it's new business or it should come under reports and announcements, which comes next anyway, so I'll just bring that up, and that is that we have, as I said earlier, I've been looking at some of the rules governing commissions and boards in Lake Forest Park, with respect, I was triggered by looking at terms and that sort of thing. But what I discovered was that in March of each year, the board shall elect a chair and a vice chair. And we have been remiss in not having a vice chair now for quite a while, because we haven't had one as long as I've been chair. And I think even before that, when Margaret was the chair, we didn't have a vice chair for some time. So we really need next month to have elections for chair and vice chair. And while I won't categorically say that I don't want to do it again, I think it would be the sort of thing that would be good if people took this on as a responsibility to rotate through. It is a little more work than just being on the board, but it also really has been, for me, an experience that's gotten me much deeper understanding of how the board works, what responsibilities are, what we need to be thinking about. And I think it would be good for all the board members to rotate through this. And I think, a year on and then years vice chair and a year's chair, and then rotating off would be an appropriate way to do it. It's not required. I think the rules say that you can be chair of a board or commission for up to 36 months. Without, having to step aside before you can then come back on as chair later, but that's not something I want to do. We should be thinking about this. And as Riley said, with Julia now rotating off, we have 2 vacant positions. We really should try to fill them.
And there is that one position that's been applied for. I don't know where Steve and the mayor are at in that, but I'll follow up, because if they're not filled, that would mean if 2 people are out, then a quorum is met. So only one person can miss a meeting, and that would be kind of so.
Well, we're at, with Julia gone, we'll be at 5.
Mhm.
So we need to have 3 for a quorum.
Would it not be 4?
The quorum is based on the total of 7.
Oh, okay.
So vacancies count against you for quorum.
Yes, okay, so that will be very difficult, so
Yeah.
it'd be good to try to identify.
Mhm.
John, do you know if there's anybody active in the stewardship foundation that you think would be good for this? I mean, I think there are a lot of stewardship foundation has a much bigger reach. And some people there might not think about the board as a
And
volunteer.
we had, some people that just came off, the board stewardship foundation, so. Certainly, I can ask him to put it in our next newsletter as well.
Yeah, that would be good, because I see us as having a lot of overlapping interests.
Right, that. Sorry, my concern, like, I would love to be on the tree board, but I would consider it, we might have a conflict between the tree board.
Well, they're overlapping interests, but different responsibilities and priorities, I think, so.
Well, I'll certainly bring it up at our next board meeting, which is in about 2 weeks.
So there's a lot of members who are not on the board, right?
Yeah, right, that's why I said.
I knew you just, if you can announce it, that would be. So that's something we do need to be thinking about. We need to think about election of chair and vice chair next month. And we need to think about getting new members. According to the rules that I printed off a couple of pages from the city's website, chair and vice chair should be selected by quorum of members by March 31st. And it says, if no chair or vice chair are elected by March 31st, the mayor shall select a chair and vice chair from the members.
I'm just envisioning Jeff.
So we don't want to have put him in that position. Okay. Reports and announcements. The one announcement that I had that I wanted to make was of Julia's departure from board, but we've already covered that. So, Barry, do you have any more reports from the council?
I have 3 other things to mention. The first, if there's diluting the message, if you're going to be advertising, practically every committee in the city is short people. So if you have members of the Stewardship Foundation that might also be interested in parks, for instance, the Parks Board is short. I think the Planning Commission is short. So by all means, advertise, please.
Yes, we have one person that's interested in parks. We have one person on that.
Next up, roundabout. So you're aware, so the plan is to put a roundabout on Ballinger Way where it hits 40th.
I live on 40th and I'm so glad to hear that.
We recently approved contract modification. The project, it seems like it will have a somewhat bigger footprint than originally planned. For the tree perspective, it does seem that there will be some trees that are impacted, because if you go to that intersection, there's a lot of big trees right on the road that will likely need to be removed. We're looking at least, now this is a very rough estimate, we're only at you know, I think 60, either 30 or 60%, I think 60% design. We're looking at maybe 3 to 4 dozen. So,
Wow.
I mean, it's yeah, it's a moderate number, but it's not, we're not looking at the hundreds that say the Stride project has. The city will, of course, be abiding by tree replacement policies, so trees will be replaced where possible. But I wanted to bring that to your attention because I think there's value in the project. I think, you know, if you're trying to get to and from 40th, that's a bit of a nightmare. But there will be tree impacts to that. And then my third announcement, this is about the state legislature. There is a bill 1078. The original version of the bill basically says that cities cannot have a tree ordinance that requires replacement. It basically says the original version says that cities must have a tree bank plan, where basically when a tree is removed, you can either pay or put a tree into the bank, and that could go elsewhere. So it would effectively neuter Lake Forest Park's requirement to plant it on the parcel. Now, that's the bad. The good is there's an amended version of the bill which is going through committee. If the amended version passes, that requirement goes away, and I think it's more of a recommendation to have a tree bank. So that, I think the members of the tree, I'm not looking to speak for you, but I would imagine you would be happier with the amended version. That would allow cities to maintain a requirement that if you cut a tree down, you have to put it back where in that parcel. But did want to bring that to your attention because if the original bill passed, it would be a fairly major change to our tree code.
Was that Bill 1048?
1078.
So that's the sort of thing we could lobby our state representative on.
Yes, though, as it happens, Representative Dewar, who is one of our representatives, is the lead sponsor of this bill. And I believe she's also the one putting out the amendment. So I think she has heard feedback from cities about this. So I think she's on, from what I can tell, and it's a bit of legalese, but from what I can tell, she's on board with making this recommended rather than required. So allowing cities to maintain their
Is
approach.
she a Lake Forest Park resident?
She is.
The district is bigger.
She lives in Bothell, but we're in the first LD, so she is one of our representatives along with Shelley Klova and Derek Stanford's our representative. Right, so I think that covers my announcements.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm happy to answer questions if people have.
That would be shocking if the unamended version. Yes, it was really upset how we enforce the tree code here.
And then I earlier today talked about the retaining wall and possible tree code. I'll be sure to keep you apprised. I mean, if it's, I mean, it's happening during public meetings, you'll be able to follow along with it as well.
Okay, any other announcements from tree board members? Hearing none. Agenda for the next meeting? Any agenda items that tree board members want to be sure are covered next? You can send me items or Riley items if you have any that come up. One of the things we talked about in the last tree board meeting with respect to the work plan was that there are 3 or 4 different items on that work plan where I had asked individual tree board members to take some responsibility for doing a little background research to come to the board with. And so I will try to send out reminders to each of you who had agreed to do something like that. And maybe we can add one or more of them to the agenda for next month. Yeah, so
Little, it was sort of sell the action plan for getting to
Good.
things.
good point. So let's say we can have an agenda item, which is to take a look at our work plan and see what we need to be working on now.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
So I think I may have mentioned this at the previous meeting, but once the inventory is done, our city attorney, Tim Pratt, has expressed interest in, I think I mentioned it's coming to one of your meetings to kind of go over the nuts and bolts of what is or is not allowed in the tree ordinance, just to provide you that sort of legal perspective.
Yeah, that would be great. You did mention that. I think we would all benefit from that. Okay. Well, we had a nice efficient meeting today. Thank you all.
If you want to open it up for a second round.
Oh, that's right. We have additional comments from the public. So
Sorry, I'll have to.
Randy has a hand up, it looks like.
Allowed to talk?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I tuned in a little late, so I really love having the opportunity before you close tonight. I'm Randy Sabanga, and I'm a board member with the Lake Forest Park Stewardship Foundation. Earlier today, I sent you 2 items, and I just wanted to give you a little context because they probably seem pretty random when they hit your email. As you know, there's going to be a massive impact to our environment and our community with this BRT program. And we have been following just about every element, but focusing on trees for now. The number of trees has suddenly gone up from the 30% design, which came out in March of 2021. The number was 439, and in the inventory that I sent, that is Sound Transit 60% design. As far as we can tell, it was completed in August and released to the public sometime in November. But the new number is 499. That is half of them in the critical area, and 64 of them are landmark trees. So this is a massive taking, and we just want to make sure the public is aware of it and how it's going to impact the gateway to Lake Forest Park on 522 and our tree canopy. I don't believe that we've seen any major notice from the city or any widespread notice. So we hope we can work with the tree board and the city administration to get the word out. With regard to the tree loss, we're focusing on a few concerns right now. One is that we really need a current canopy study. We need to determine what kind of loss of canopy that this is going to mean. And I'm hearing it's in the works, but we don't have any definitive date. We also want assurance that the city will require Sound Transit, like any other developer, to comply with our tree code. The community, of course, has worked decades to create one with teeth. We finally have it. So it's important that we hold Sound Transit accountable. There's a little gray area because many of these trees are in the right-of-ways owned by WashDOT. Some of them are owned city right-of-ways, and it's not clear with respect to the state right-of-ways if our code applies there. So we've asked for some clarity from Phil Hill and Jeff Perigo on that. It's also important to have a sense of what drove this number rising from 439 to 500. There's really no explanation that we've seen, and it would be great to have our arborist and planning department track that and review the information so we aren't taking more trees than we need, and maybe we can evaluate whether or not we can reduce the number. And then finally, we've been asking for a while now for any sense of what the plan for tree replacement and mitigation is going to be. And I think the challenge for our city is that Sound Transit isn't unfortunately forthcoming with this information, but with the 90% design just around the corner in April, we really need a plan for where the trees are going to be replanted, who's going to maintain them, about in terms of those that can't be replaced in the same location. Do we site them elsewhere, or can we create maybe a tree fund that Sound Transit would work with the city on, so we can determine how best to use that as a resource? So just going forward, I hope we can work with the tree board on our, as you said, as our overlying concerns. And we will definitely ask, as John mentioned, at our next meeting, if anybody is interested in joining the board as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Randy.
You bet.
We've heard now from, both John and Vicky and Councilmember Goldman's assessment of what's going on from the council's perspective on this. We look forward to learning more about it.
Thanks
Sure.
again. Okay.
And
I think there's any other members from the public, unless Anna wanted to share an arborist report.
oh yeah, Hannah, would you please give us just a little information? Riley passed around a list of tree removal permits. Can you help us interpret this a little bit?
Yep, there, we have 8 new permits. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, there's 8 new permits, all the ones that aren't marked as minor or major permits that are mostly associated with development. I think because I'm still like, I think this is my 6th full week of actually working. I'm still getting caught up on a lot of projects that were submitted in October and November and December of last year. So there are just a lot of projects going on.
Okay, thank you. I like the map design that came
Yeah.
with this, so that we can get a visual about where these tree removal permits are.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know I was trying to replicate the same kind of format that you expected from Ashley. But unfortunately, there were no guidelines on how to pull that report from our permitting software. And Steve is working on putting me in contact with our Acela kind of maintainer to help me get those types of reports pulled so that it's a lot easier for me to give you guys the data of how many permits are getting opened, how many tree removals are issued each month, along with how many trees are issued to be replanted.
I bet that Ashley probably just hand entered them into a Excel spreadsheet or something, rather than
Ooh,
finding some means of transferring it. But
yeah.
maybe
Well,
someone-
it all goes into our permitting software, and just kind of with the high demand of trying to get through all these projects in a reasonable time for all of the citizens of Lake Forest Park, I am trying to focus on getting things done.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you.
Is that gonna be posted anywhere, or is it posted now?
I
Is that-
I put it out for
don't-
this
yeah.
meeting, but I can email it out to everyone as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, if there is no more business or announcements, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Andy or Marty, care to move to adjourn?
So moved.
Andy moves to adjourn, Marty, second, all in favor?
I'll second.
Aye, and we'll see you next month on the 1st of March.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
That would be great.
Can I get one of the permit types? Is there an extra one?
One, this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some
Yeah,
there.
I can take one there.
Is it okay?
Yeah.